welcome to AP Euro, the flipped version. Today we're going to be looking at the absolutism and the beginnings of this. So we're going to look at what it is, what are its characteristics, and who influenced the formation of this. What is absolutism? Before we can talk about what it is or where it came from and what are its characteristics, and then eventually who are the quintessential absolute power monarchies, we need to know what it is. Absolutism in its most basic form is the idea that the central authority comes from the crown or king, and this comes from the belief in the king's right or ability to rule comes from the divine right, that he has been put in authority by God, and so therefore he answers to no man. And we'll get more into other characteristics. The characteristics of a absolute monarch. These are the very basic ones. There are a lot more and a lot more detailed cover in your book, so be sure to read. First, most basic one is national monarchs or absolute monarchs are not subordinate to national assemblies. This means the king or the crown is above the people and above the nobility, and they answer to no one. And many times they don't even call the national assemblies, as we'll see as we get into looking at each one. They maintain large standing armies. These things cost money, and they have the money to pay them. So this also does away with nobility maintaining armies, because the king has an army. He doesn't need the nobility's army. He doesn't need to hire mercenaries. He has his own men that are loyal and subject to him. And lastly, this is a new thing, they have career officials that are appointed by the king and are report directly to the king. So no more nobilities and provisional governors. You have people that the king has hired, and they answer to him and him alone. This takes the power out of the hands of the nobility and gives it directly to the king. And oftentimes, a random fact, the national monarchs, or absolute monarchs again, would maintain a secret police that would go around and report on nobility that were plotting to overthrow them. So you had, the very beginnings of the characteristics of those tyrants that would rule the 20th century in Europe. What are your major influences on absolute monarchies? Well, there are several. Your first is Jean Bodin. He wrote during the times of the French Civil Wars, and if you remember back to the War of the Three Henries, it was chaotic, it was bloody, and it was a mess. And what he got from this was that from this chaos, he only saw one way for that to be avoided again, and that is to have one absolute ruler that would maintain order. And that by having that, they could maintain the government and maintain the rule of law. Another major influence on this, absolute monarchies, was that of Thomas Hobbes. He wrote The Leviathan, and he was very pessimistic towards the nature of man. He thought the nature of man was that of evil. He saw man's life as solitary, poor, nasty, brutish, and short. That if we were left to our own devices, we would be a role of anarchy and the carnal drive of every person is power, and that would lead us to do evil things. So we need to have rule of law for man to evolve, and the easiest way to do this is to have an absolute power. Now, he did not believe in the divine right, so he did not believe that one person was chosen by God, but that we did need one strong central authoritarian government. Alright, the third major influence on absolute monarchs was that of Bishop Jacques Bossuet, who believed in the divine right. The divine right says that God placed a king above the people, and so therefore the king answers to no man or no group, only to that of God, and so therefore he should have absolute power and have a strong central authority. Many kings loved the writings of Bishop Jacques Bossuet, especially Louis XIV of France, and the Stuart monarch of England. And so we will look at both of those in the upcoming videos. One group was much more successful than the other in establishing an absolute monarchy. So that is the basic setup of what begins the absolute monarch period of Europe. Not all kingdoms that we will be looking at are successful in setting up an absolute monarchy. We will be looking at France, Spain, and England in the upcoming videos. So this was just the introductory. We'll see how successful people are in actually putting these things together.